Good morning, and good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are from. My name is Navin Pathak, and I am a clinical pharmacist currently practicing pharmacy in Drug Information Unit and Pharmacovigilance Cell of Itoda Hospital, Madan Mandari Academy of Health Sciences. And I also am a lecturer at the Department of Pharmacy and Clinical Pharmacology at Madan Mandari Academy of Health Sciences. So, in today's session, I'm going to talk about what exactly is predatory journal, what are the practices, what are the predatory practices, and what is the impact of predatory journal and practices in the scientific integrity and overall research process. So, as we all know that before submitting any papers, we first prepare a consolidated and a very concise form of a thesis known as a manuscript, right? So first you do a research. Either the research can be done in an academic setting or you can do it in a particular field. You first prepare the report, and that report is then consolidated, and then it is converted to a manuscript, and that manuscript is then submitted to a respected respectful journal that matches with your aims and scopes of your paper. And once the paper is submitted, the editor-in-chief or the associate editor of the journal evaluates the suitability of the manuscript, right? He or she exactly watches out for the scientific quality and whether the fact that your manuscript properly adheres to the scientific rigor of the journal. And once the scientific editor-in-chief evaluates the scientific suitability and quality, then he or she sends it for the reviewers. He or she sends it for the reviewers belonging to the particular field known as peer reviewers. Then the reviewing process then starts. So this is the general steps for the process of publication. So before dealing with predatory practices, first we need to know what is the process of publication. And once the manuscript goes into the peer review process, the reviewers will provide feedback regarding whether or not the manuscript can be accepted for publications or needs any kind of major or minor revisions, or it should be rejected, are given. Once again given back to the editor-in-chief or the associate editor. And once these kind of reviews or feedback are obtained by the editor-in-chief, he or she further reviews it and then accepts or rejects the paper depending on the suitability of the paper, and it gets then published in a journal with a certain impact factor. So this is the overall step for the publishing of paper, but we need to know what is the process after once the paper has been accepted. And there are two different steps we'll be talking about in this presentation. So we'll be in this session where the first one is the hybrid model and the second one is open access model. And the concept of open access model somehow underscores or somehow promotes the idea of predatory practices in today's context. So let us take an example of this journal. This is a first quartile journal indexed in Scopus database, and this is research in social and administrative pharmacy published by Elsevier. And you can see there, just in below the title, you can see that it is written supports open access, right? So once you go through the author section, you can also find that the journal chooses two choices to publish their paper, and the first one is gold open access and the second one is subscription. So this is one of a first quartile journal which provides you two different options to publish your paper. The first one is gold open access and subscription. In the open access you have to pay a certain kind of price, right? Certain kind of price, then only your paper will be openly access to the public and to other reviewers or to every scientific people out there who participates in the field of pharmacy professional upliftment. And in the second option, that is subscription, only articles are made available to the subscriber as well as the developing countries and patients groups through the access program. So you need to be subscribed, you need to have a subscription access to this journal, you need to have a valid institutional email to access this, and this is one of the major lackings when it comes to Nepali context. And when it comes to subscription-based publishing, you do not need any kind of publication fee. So in the same journal, you can also see in a certain format that the article processing charge for the journal for all articles, which is exclusive of taxes, is USD 4,880, which is a huge amount for publishing an article, that is to make it open access. And if you see the current price in context to Nepali price, if you convert it as per May 1st, you can see it corresponds to about almost about 7 lakhs, and so which is a huge amount of money. So for a Nepali context, when it comes to doing research, it also means publishing a paper, not just doing your valid works by using robust technologies or methods to produce a certain reproducible results, but also means that you need to publish so that it can be reproducible. It needs to have a certain kind of impact. But as you can say that if you want to publish a paper in a very prestigious journal for a context like Nepal, you need to pay a huge amount of money for just for publishing, and which is not making so much sense. That is why for research and development, for publishing a research, publishing a paper, or for those kind of institutions which are library-based institutions where huge amount of money needs to be there for publication is not there, which make it very much um, lacking, which lacks us for publishing our paper, and we need to pay it, or we need to have an access through open access paper through you can see such as example of uh, such as research for life access, group A access, or for those kind of countries, or for our countries being lower middle income countries, only being given 50% of the total charge, and which also makes valid to some point. But once you see a bigger picture of it, it will create a very further for the bigger consequence in coming days. Another example, you can see that this is a journal of pharmaceutical policy and practice, and it is also a first quartile journal. And in the below section, you can see that there is an open access journal. It has been written. So there are certain kind of journals that only produces the paper in its open access format, and there are other kinds of journals that publishes its paper in two different kinds of formats: subscription and open access. So this is the entire peer review process. You can see that this has been taken from the online Wiley reviewing process. So you can see that the author submits the article, which is assessed by the editor, which is sent to reviewers, and once the reviews are sent back to the editor, and the editor further assesses the paper, and then if it is necessary to send it for revision, he sends it or she sends it, and then for the review or needed or not, and so wise the paper is accepted and is then um, sent to the production company, and then it is published. And the context of open access or paying a hefty price comes in the production section. So before beginning our topic, we also need to know that we are trying to publish our paper in a very impactful journal. But what is impact factor? So there is a concept, there is a quantitative value, right? So you want to measure the impact of a certain kind of journals, and you want to measure it quantitatively by a certain margin, by a certain number. So to calculate that number, we want to know the number of citations and the number of papers published over a corresponding years, right? So in this example, you can see that in the first year, there has been 40 articles published, and in the second year, there has been 60 articles published. So the impact factor for a 3 year, corresponding 3 years, turns out to be the number of citations divided by the numbers of papers published over the year. So you can see that the number of papers, which is 40 plus 60, they have a corresponding citations about 100 in the third year. So the impact factor for the third year comes out to be 1, which is a very huge number. This is a very good score. Similarly, there are also other databases which uh, measures its strength through different kinds of quantitative scores, such as site score tracker, which also quantitatively analyze the values in terms of citations and in terms of documents. This example is the leading journal of the first quartile journal, that is CA journal, the cancer journal, which is produced by American Cancer Society. So you can see that in the just 3 years, there has been more than 90,000 citations, only with 105, 106 papers being submitted or published over the 3 years. So that is quite huge number of citations. So this is the brief of models of academic publication. The first is traditional model, where the publisher charges institutions and individuals to read the paper, and the content is not freely available even for publicly funded studies, but you need to be able to subscribe, or you need to have a certain kind of subscription to access the contents. The second one is open access model, where the contributors pay journals to publish their research through a certain charge known as article processing charges, and articles are publicly available free of the cost. And there are also certain kind of context where it helps for low middle income countries like Nepal in making these kind of articles free of cost. And because of this open access nature, it has much more viewership, much more readership, and which is a very good scope in today's context too. However, there are also publisher which provide peer review. However, publisher also do not pay reviewers, and this is why certain kind of open access journals, thus claiming huge amount of money, the reviewers may not get exact amount. So that is why certain kind of peer reviewers or peer reviewing process also may get late. But while talking about the open access model and its advantages, we also need to know that it has its own challenges, right? So it widens the gap between the developed countries and the developing countries to publish. You can see in the earlier slides, you can see that the huge economic gap in between the Nepalese context and between the higher income countries. And if you compare it that, then this further widens the gap in publishing a certain kind of research. So in order to publish our research, we need to be able to integrate ourselves with researchers from higher income countries so that we can use the um, institutional libraries to go through open access nature. So once you understand the basic idea of traditional model and open access model, we can then jump into the predatory journal. So coming till that, there is no exact definition of predatory journals. It is just like a Pandora's box, right? If you're trying to extract the knowledge of a predatory journal, it further gets complex and complex because the definition is not exactly there. However, there are few certain doubts and few certain ideas regarding the predatory journal. You can simply call it as those kind of journal that predates you, right? That try to consumes you through you by taking certain amount of money, and by luring you into the fact that you might get an open access publication within just few weeks. So it is an predatory itself. By the name itself, you can call it as a by its meaning that it actively asks researchers for manuscript, right? So you might be getting your emails in your spams folder or in your direct inbox claiming that we want you to submit your paper, we want you to submit this kind of paper, we want to be a member of this. So this might be predatory in those contexts. However, there is no exact definition, and these journals are way too straightforward to take any author's fees, right? So I'll be publishing your paper and I will be needing certain kind of money, 1,000 $200 or $100 or 1,000 Indian price or 1,000 certain currency, and I'll be publishing a paper open accessly just within a week. And these kind of things that makes it a very confusing and very doubtful nature, thus giving it the predatory journal name. Similarly, the concept of predatory journal needs to be understood by many students as well as many researchers who are in their first phase, because this kind of journals lack the concept of basic peer review system. So when you talk about peer review system, it is the basic heart of an academic nature. So once if a research does not have any kind of peer review, it can question the scientific integrity of the paper. That is why predatory publishing in a predatory journals, knowingly, intentionally or unintentionally, can affect you mentally, affect you in the long term also. That is very necessary for you to understand. So the common victims of this kind of journals are not only inexperienced readers, but also researchers who are tricked into publishing their articles in these journals, right? So in many of the research centers, many of the academic houses, when we talk about promotion, we talk about publishing different kinds of papers, and because of the promotion issues and because of different other issues, we get lured into these kind of activities, thus publishing our papers into these kind of journals. So they are just there for the sole purpose of publishing, and which makes it even more doubtful regarding their validity. And because of the existing use and numerous myriad numbers of different journals in today's context, it further complicates for us to differentiate which one is predatory and which one is a general normal journal, in fact. So in order to identify them, there has been different kinds of librarians and different kinds of scientists over the period of course of times who have helped us to identify them. And one of them is Jeffrey Bell, who was a librarian at the University of Colorado, to understand the fact that there were several doubtful, dubious ideas regarding these journals could be a predatory journal. So you can also go through billslist.net and to identify these might be the possible predatory journals indeed. And later also came a revised version of the list known as Cabell's blacklist, which also helped us to identify or give a certain light into which kind of journals could be a predatory journal. So why do academic publish in this kind of journal? So over the period of time, we still value quantity over quality value. So generally, I can feel that, and many of the researchers also wants much more quantity over the quality value, because the quality value papers or those kind of papers will take much more times in the peer review, and it will take further to increase um, your scientific rigor, right? So you want to value over quantity, and in step of increasing the quantity, you get lured by these kind of predatory journals. And similarly, we also talked about how hiring and promotion of academics are largely based on the number of publications. And because of this concept of hiring over quantity, this can falsely promote the idea of predatory practices too. Similarly, it also helps pseudo researchers to prosper, and you might also get unintentionally, or you might get trapped into publishing. So, students who are in their first phase of trying to publish their papers, or researchers who are in their first phase of publishing this kind of papers, needs to know about predatory journals. So, what is the exact harm caused by this kind of predatory journals is that these kind of papers corrupt the literature field, right? So, we talk about scientific integrity. It harms the basic ideas of some, and the medical science can be particularly hit hard by this kind of papers, because these kind of papers lack the peer review concept. And if there is the lacking of the peer review concept, the quality, right, the scientific rigor of the paper can be decreased, which might ultimately harm the science. And thus, we are talking about how peer review is at the heart of academic evaluation. If there is no such justified peer review, it might degrade the quality of science itself too. And different kinds of predatory journals which promotes false academic publishing, they also do not watch out for any cases of falsification, fabrication, and plagiarism, which might further promotes the idea of irresponsible conduct of research, right? So we need to understand there is a huge harm caused by these kind of predatory journals, and you want to be safe from these kind of journals. So how does one find out if a predatory given journal is predatory or not, right? So it requires a bit of work, definitely. And some journals, some people think any journal from an unknown publisher or a journal that charges for publication is necessarily predatory. That is not necessarily correct. However, there are certain kind of doubtful ideas that might help you to identify this might be a predatory journals. For example, if the journal's editor names and its qualification are not in the journal website, then that might be a context for a predatory journals, and there is no academic expertise in the journal fields of the editor name. For example, if we're talking about certain journal, then the journal must state its editor-in-chief, its qualification, its academic expertise, right? So if the journal tries to hide any information regarding the article processing charge, and that could be a doubtful note for the fact that it might be a predatory journals. And if it is not properly indexed, so if our journals are not properly indexed, if the journals are not properly indexed in the so-called databases, it kind of what creates a doubtful idea on the fact that it might be a predatory one. Similarly, the name of the journal is not related with its mission, the name of the journal not reflecting its origin, poorly maintained website and misspellings and grammatical errors. If you see a journal and the journal has poorly maintained websites, misspellings, and grammatical errors, it needs to be understand that there is some kind of doubtful nature of the journal. And unauthorized use of licensed images on their website republishes paper already published in other venues, and the journal claiming the fact that it is a boastful language claiming to be a leading publisher. So, what are the dangers of predatory practices in academic field? Just one way, it can be harmful for academic career. Your paper, despite being valid, might get published in a predatory journal. That would definitely decrease the impact of the paper and impact of the journal. Uh, thus by impacting your professional growth too. It might be a bad reputation, waste of effort, time, and money on researchers. So, if you are using a huge amount of time, you are using public funding or grant, you are doing research through grant and then publishing it in a predatory journal, that would be just making no sense at all, right? So over the period of time, it would also increase in the decline in the trust in scientific research. So, who are the stakeholders associated with reducing or mitigating this problem of predatory practices? The first one is researchers themselves who need to understand that there are different kinds of journals and there are different models of publishing, and we do not want to publish in a predatory journal. Academic institution, the major role also lies with academic institution who wants to promote their lecturers, assistant professor, assistant professor, and professors, and even students to encourage to publish in a very impactful journal, not in predatory. So they can conduct some training sessions to identify predatory journals and give motivational sessions regarding predatory journal to identify predatory journals indeed. And the first and the third one is funders. So, for example, if you are a funder and if you fund certain kind of grants to a certain researchers, you want to make sure that the researcher or the principal investigator publishes the paper through your grant in a very impactful journal. And the journals and publisher also do have certain kind of roles in establishing themselves as not a predatory one. They need to be making sure or removing any kind of doubtful thoughts that they are predatory indeed. Regulatory bodies, of course, such as the Ministry of Education, Ministry of um, Ministry of Education, along with different other think tanks such as NHRC, such as the National. We talk about Agriculture Research Council, research associations, and different other NAST. This kind of association, think tank, Policy Research Institute, can specifically focus on this kind of predatory practices, thus promoting the idea of very ethical publishing and public and patients, right? So once in a while, there will come a time when the Nepalese society will also have a better health literacy, and they do want to read a certain kind of information through these kind of literatures. And if the patient or the publics are reading the literatures from predatory journals, that would make no sense, right? So they are also the stakeholders associated with mitigating any kind of predatory practices in general. So, what to focus? You first need to know that every journal which is not predatory mentions these things, right? So, if it is an open access journal, it is definitely listed in a directory of open access journals, directory, DOASA. And it also needs to ensure that it is publishing on the basis of Committee of Publication Ethics, that is COP. You can also watch out for this website. Majority of the journals which are not predatory and highly impactful journals claim that they are publishing through on the basis of Committee of Publication Ethics. So, and the last step is you need to submit and you need to be able to first think, on what kind of um, journals you are preferring. You need to check whether the fact that it is predatory or not, then only submit it. So think, check, submit campaign itself is very much important to avoid any kind of predatory practices. So the points that you need to remember is that when it comes to predatory practices in Nepal, we very much least we very much discuss very low about predatory practices in Nepal because of the quality quantity system of Nepal, and majority of the promotion system in Nepal, you can see that it is paper based. Therefore, we need to increase our quality, thereby limiting the predatory practices in coming days. And lack of funding resources. We talked about how there is a huge gap between an open access paper and Nepali currency, right? So if there is a very good funding sources, then our papers will be getting published through our own resources in this kind of high impactful journals. Majority of the people also think that predatory journals is a kind of imposition of the global north and the global south, which is of course fascinating in some point. Regarding the idea of Nepal journals online, we also need, I personally feel that we need to make sure to address what are the journals and what are the peer review process of these journals to ensure the peer review practices, or we need to have a certain kind of directive, a certain kind of act that ensures the peer review process, the publication process. Might be certain kind of journals who want to go for open access, right? So open access along with a certain kind of price. So what could be the measure for that? So these things could be also integrated with our Nepal journals online, which could be helpful and also help increase our scientific rigor or the scientific clarity of our journals in coming days. So another thing is that we need to create awareness as lecturers, as researchers, as scientific persons. We need to aware our students. We need to increase other awareness to our researchers that we want to avoid this kind of predatory practices in coming days. And the last and the most important thing is that the universities and the research institution must have to be serious on the issue of ethics, right? So And for example, universities might create a different kinds of directives for their institution to get public for their students to publish a paper in a very impactful journal, right? So that they want to avoid different kinds of predatory practices. So, I want to thank my respected mentors, Dr. Nirina Khatki, Dr. Namraj Dhami, Dr. Takaram Bandari, Dr. Basanti Giri, who helped me during this predatory academic practice in South Asia, where I was chosen as an intern while serving as an intern in National Young Academy of Nepal. And this gave me an insight into predatory practices, predatory journals. So I want to, and I'm very much indebted towards them. I want to thank them from my heart. So these are my references, and thank you.